My name is Sloan, and I'm 32 years old. Right now, I'm standing in a law office in Manhattan, holding a pen that's about to change my life forever. The contract in front of me says $8.5 million. $8.5 million. For AgriSense, the company I built from nothing. But as I sign my name on the dotted line, all I can hear is my mother's voice echoing in my head from 5 years ago, sharp and cold as winter wind across an Iowa cornfield. You're our disappointment daughter. Your brother is the real success. I glance at my phone sitting on the mahogany table, knowing I should call home and tell them. But will they even care? Or will they find some way to make this about what I owe them? To understand how I got here, to this moment of victory that tastes somehow both sweet and bitter, I need to take you back to where it all started. On a dying family farm in Iowa, where I learned that, sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones who cut the deepest. Before we dive into this journey, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you've ever felt like the black sheep of your family, like you had to fight for every scrap of recognition, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications because this story gets wild, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Trust me, what my family did to try to destroy me will shock you. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up on 300 acres of Iowa farmland that had been in my family for 3 generations. My father, Warren, and my mother, Judith, grew corn and soybeans like their parents before them and their parents before that. It was honest work, hard work, the kind that leaves your hands calloused and your back aching by the time you're 40. I loved that land as a child, loved the smell of turned earth in spring and the golden waves of corn in late summer. But I learned early that my love for the farm wasn't enough because I had been born with the wrong body. I wasn't the son they wanted. I was just Sloan, the daughter who came 4 years after my brother Clayton, the real heir to the family legacy. From the time I could walk, the difference in how they treated us was obvious. Clayton got to ride on the tractor with Dad, learning how to work the machinery, how to read the soil, how to time the planting and harvest. I got sent inside to help Mom with dishes and laundry. When I was 12 years old, I asked my father about the irrigation system we used, curious about how it worked and whether there might be more efficient ways to water the crops. He looked at me like IDA asked him to explain quantum physics to a dog. "Girls don't need to know about that stuff, Sloan," he said, turning back to his work. "You'll get married someday. Let your husband worry about farming." I remember standing there in the barn, feeling something shrivel up inside me, some small hope I hadn't even known I was carrying. By the time I was 15, I had started reading everything I could find about modern agriculture, about crop rotation and soil health and precision farming techniques. I spent hours in the school library after classes, devouring articles and studies. One night at dinner, I worked up the courage to suggest that we try rotating our crops differently, planting cover crops in the off-season to replenish the nitrogen in the soil naturally instead of relying so heavily on chemical fertilizers. My mother set down her fork with a clatter that made me flinch. "Don't you dare try to tell your father how to farm," she snapped. "Has been doing this since before you were born. What do you think you know that he doesn't?" Clayton smirked at me from across the table, and Dad just shook his head, going back to his pot roast like I hadn't spoken at all. That was the night I realized that nothing I said would ever matter to them, not as long as Clayton existed to be their golden child. When Clayton graduated high school, they sent him to Iowa State University to study agricultural business. The whole extended family came to his graduation party. There was a cake, a pig roast, relatives I barely knew, patting him on the back and talking about how he was going to take the family farm into the future. When I graduated 2 years later with a 4.0 grade average and acceptance letters to 6 universities, there was no party. There was just my mother saying over breakfast, "College is expensive, Sloan. And honestly, what's the point? You'll just get married and have babies? That's what women do?" I had applied to every scholarship I could find, and when I got a full ride to the University of California at Davis for agricultural engineering, I thought maybe, just maybe, they would be proud. Instead, my father exploded. "California!" he shouted. "What the hell are you going to do way out there? You should stay here and help the family. That's where you're needed." I tried to explain that I wanted to learn, wanted to study new technologies that could help farmers like us, that I could come back and make our farm better. But Warren wasn't interested in my explanations. "If you leave," he said, his voice dropping to something cold and final, "don't expect anything from this family. You'll be on your own." My mother cried, but her tears weren't for losing me. They were angry tears, resentful tears. "You're so selfish," she said. "Always thinking about yourself, never about what this family needs." Clayton was the only one who hugged me before I left. He held me tight in the driveway that August morning, whispered, "I'm sorry," so quietly I almost didn't hear it, but he didn't say it loud enough for our parents to hear. He didn't stand up for me. And as I drove away in my beat-up Honda Civic with everything I owned stuffed in the back, $800 in my bank account, and a full scholarship that felt more like a prison sentence than a gift, I watched the farm disappear in my rearview mirror and wondered if I'd ever truly be welcome there again. The University of California at Davis was like landing on another planet. The campus sprawled under perpetual sunshine, filled with students who talked excitedly about sustainable agriculture and precision technology and changing the world. I loved it immediately and hated how alone I felt in the middle of it. My scholarship covered tuition and books, but everything else was on me. I worked 3 jobs that first year, pulling shifts at a campus coffee shop before dawn, cleaning research labs in the afternoons, and tutoring underclassmen in math and chemistry in the evenings. I shared a tiny dorm room with 3 other girls who seemed to have endless money from their parents, who went home every holiday break to families who actually wanted them there. Thanksgiving of my freshman year, everyone packed up and left campus. I stayed behind because I couldn't afford the flight home, and, honestly, I wasn't sure I'd be welcome even if I could. I called home on Thanksgiving Day from the empty hallway of my dorm, listening to the phone ring 4 times before my mother picked up. I could hear the noise of family in the background, laughter and the clatter of dishes. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Happy Thanksgiving." There was a pause, then Judith's voice, distracted and cool. "Oh, Sloan. We're just sitting down to eat. Clayton is helping your father fix the tractor. Has been such a help around here. Are you doing all right with your classes?" I wanted to tell her I was lonely, that I was working myself to exhaustion, that I missed home even though home had never really felt like mine. Instead, I said, "Yeah, classes are good. I'm learning a lot." Another pause. "Well, that's nice, dear. We need to go. The turkey's getting cold." She hung up before I could say I loved her. I sat on the floor of that empty hallway and ate ramen noodles alone, telling myself this was temporary, that it would all be worth it someday. By my junior year, I had found my stride academically. I was at the top of my class, working on a research project, developing an application that used drone technology to monitor soil moisture levels across large fields. The idea was to give farmers real-time data so they could irrigate more efficiently, saving water and money. I was proud of the work, proud enough that I did something stupid. I sent a detailed presentation about the project home to my parents, hoping maybe this time they would see that I was doing something meaningful, something that could actually help people like them. I even imagined my father reading it and calling me, his voice warm for once, saying he was proud. 2 weeks went by, with no response. Then I saw Clayton's Facebook post. It was a long post about innovation in agriculture, about how the family farm was embracing new technology. Attached was a presentation that looked remarkably similar to mine, same concepts, same basic structure, but with Clayton's name on it instead of mine. The post had dozens of comments, people from our hometown congratulating him on being so forward-thinking, so smart. My mother had shared it with the caption, "So proud of our son, always finding ways to improve the family business." I stared at my laptop screen for a solid 10 minutes, a hot rage building in my chest that I didn't know what to do with. I called Clayton immediately. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice casual. "Hey, Sloan. What's up? What's up?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "You stole my project. You took what I sent home and you're pretending it's yours." He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "I didn't steal anything. I just presented your ideas in a way people here would understand. You're too technical. I made it accessible." "You didn't credit me at all," I said. "Everyone thinks it's your idea. Come on." he said, and I could hear the irritation creeping into his voice now. Does it really matter whose name is on it? I'm here, doing the work. You're out there in California doing your thing. I just presented it better. You're being too sensitive. Before I could respond, my father's voice came on the line in the background, loud enough for me to hear. Is that your sister? Tell her we don't have time for drama. We've got real work to do here. Clayton said something I couldn't quite make out, then came back to the phone. Look, I gotta go. Don't make this a big deal, okay? He hung up. I sat in my tiny apartment, roommates moving around in other rooms, and I cried until I couldn't breathe. That was the night I decided I wouldn't share anything with them again. If they wanted to steal from me, I would just have to build something they couldn't touch. That's when I met Dr. Ramona Hughes, a professor in the agricultural engineering department who specialized in technology applications for small farms. She noticed me after class one day, noticed that I asked more questions than anyone else, that I stayed late working in the labs. You've got something, she told me one afternoon as I was packing up my things. A way of seeing problems that most students don't have. Have you thought about what you want to do after graduation? I admitted I didn't know, that I had thought maybe I'd go home and help my family, but that didn't seem like an option anymore. Dr. Hughes studied me for a long moment, then said, I'm working on a research project with some grant funding. I could use someone with your skills. Interested? That invitation changed everything. Working with Dr. Hughes, I wasn't just a disappointment daughter or the girl who wasn't good enough. I was a researcher, a problem solver, someone whose ideas mattered. For the first time since leaving Iowa, I felt like maybe I could build something that was truly mine. Dr. Hughes told me something I've never forgotten. We were working late one night, troubleshooting a sensor array, and out of nowhere she said, I see myself in you, you know. My family didn't think I'd amount to anything either. Don't let anyone dim your light, Sloan. Not even the people who are supposed to love you. I didn't realize until later that night, driving back to my apartment, that I was crying again, but this time it wasn't from sadness, it was relief. Someone finally saw me. I graduated from UC Davis with honors, summa cum laude, with a degree in agricultural engineering and 3 research papers published in academic journals. My parents didn't come to the graduation. When I called to tell them the date, my mother said they were in the middle of harvest season and couldn't possibly get away. You understand, she said, though it wasn't a question. Clayton sent a text message that said, Congrats, sis, with a thumbs up emoji. That was it. I walked across that stage and accepted my diploma with Dr. Hughes cheering from the audience, and I told myself I didn't care that my family wasn't there. I told myself I didn't need them anymore. I was lying to myself, of course. You don't stop wanting your parents' approval just because they've proven 1,000 times they'll never give it to you. 2 months after graduation, I decided to go home to Iowa for a visit. I hadn't been back in 2 years, and some stupid hopeful part of me thought maybe things would be different now that I had my degree. Maybe they would finally see that I had made something of myself. The farm looked smaller than I remembered, the house more run down. My mother answered the door and hugged me briefly, her arms stiff and uncomfortable. You're so thin, she said, which wasn't a compliment. California must not be feeding you right. My father nodded at me from his chair in the living room, barely looking up from the agricultural report he was reading. Clayton was there too, and he at least seemed happy to see me, gave me a real hug, asked about school, but within an hour, it became clear that nothing had changed at all. Dinner that night was awkward and tense. My mother asked me what I was planning to do now that I had my fancy degree, the word fancy dripping with something that wasn't quite mockery but close. I told them I was looking at jobs with agricultural technology companies, that I wanted to develop systems to help farmers. Warren grunted. Book learning is one thing, he said. But if you don't know how to actually work a farm, all that education doesn't mean much. Clayton started talking about the farm then, about how he was planning to expand, about a loan he was taking out from the bank for $200,000 to buy more equipment and more land from a neighbor. My parents hung on his every word, asking questions, offering advice, completely engaged in a way they had never been with me. I sat there pushing green beans around my plate, feeling like I was 12 years old again, invisible at my own family's table. 2 years passed. I took a job with a small agricultural technology startup in Silicon Valley, working long hours for not much money, living in a cramped apartment with 5 roommates because rent in the Bay Area was astronomical. I was learning about business and software development and how to take ideas from research papers and turn them into actual products that farmers could use. I sent occasional updates home, emails that mostly went unanswered. Then one night, my phone rang at 11 p.m. It was my mother, and my heart jumped because she never called, especially not late at night. "Mom? Is everything okay?" I asked. Her voice was tight, angry. "Your brother's farm expansion failed. He's bankrupt. The bank is going to foreclose on his equipment." I didn't understand at first what that had to do with me, but then she continued. "If you hadn't left, if you had stayed here like family is supposed to, you could have helped him. You could have been here working alongside him instead of running off to play career woman in California." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "Mom, I had no idea Clayton was struggling. Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Why would we tell you?" she snapped. "You made it clear you don't care about this family. You're too busy with your important life out there to think about the people who raised you." My father got on the phone then, his voice cold. "Your brother needs help, Sloan. His family. Everything we have is at risk because of his debts. But you wouldn't understand loyalty, would you? Not when you've got your fancy job and your fancy life." I wanted to scream at them, to point out that they had never supported me, that they had actively tried to keep me from leaving, that they had stolen my work and dismissed every accomplishment he'd ever had. But instead, I heard myself asking, "How much does he need?" There was a pause, then Warren said, "15,000 would keep him afloat until spring." I had exactly $15,000 in my savings account, money I had been putting aside for months, living on ramen and skipping meals, money I had planned to use to maybe eventually afford a place of my own without roommates. I sent them the money the next day. Clayton called me after the wire transfer went through. His voice was thick with relief, and something that might have been shame. "Thank you, Sloan. I swear I'll pay you back. I just need to get through this season and I'll send you every penny." "It's okay," I told him, because he was my brother and somewhere deep down I still loved him despite everything. "Just let me know if you need anything else." 6 months went by. Then a year. Clayton never paid me back. He stopped answering my texts, stopped responding to my emails. When I finally called the farm, my mother told me he was busy and couldn't come to the phone. I asked about the money, trying to keep my voice calm, and Judith got defensive immediately. "He's struggling, Sloan. He's doing his best. Not everyone can just throw money around like you can." I wasn't throwing money around. I was living in a shoebox apartment, still working for a startup that could barely make payroll, eating discount groceries, and walking everywhere to save bus fare. But to them, because I wasn't physically on that farm suffering alongside them, I must have been living large. On my 26th birthday, no one from my family called. Not my mother, not my father, not Clayton. I sat alone in a park near my apartment after work, watching families have picnics, couples walk dogs, normal people living normal lives with people who cared about them. I thought about giving up. I thought about calling home and apologizing for leaving, for having ambitions beyond that farm, for being born a daughter instead of a son. I thought about how easy it would be to just surrender, to go back and be whatever small thing they wanted me to be. Then my phone buzzed. It was an email from Dr. Hughes. The subject line said, "Thought of you." The email itself was short. "I heard about a grant opportunity through the USDA for agricultural innovation. Application deadline is in 3 weeks. You should apply. You have something worth building, Sloan. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I read that email 5 times, sitting on that park bench. Then I went home, opened my laptop, and started writing a grant proposal. It was my last shot. If this didn't work, I didn't know what I would do. I spent 3 weeks working on that grant application like my life depended on it, because in a very real way, it did. The USDA Innovation Grant was offering $50,000 in seed funding for agricultural technology projects that could help small farmers. My proposal focused on developing an artificial intelligence system that could predict pest and disease outbreaks in crops by analyzing weather patterns, soil conditions, and historical data. The idea was to give farmers early warnings so they could take preventative action instead of reactive measures, saving money and reducing the need for heavy pesticide use. I worked on the application every spare moment I had, before work, after work, through lunch breaks. My roommate Lacey would find me asleep at the kitchen table, my laptop still open, my neck cramped from being hunched over for hours. "You're going to kill yourself over this," she said more than once. "What if you don't get it? What if all this work is for nothing?" I understood her concern. I did. But she didn't understand what it was like to have your family treat you like a failure for your entire life, to have every achievement dismissed or stolen or ignored. This grant, this project, it was my chance to build something that was undeniably mine, something they couldn't take credit for or diminish. "If I don't try," I told Lacey, "I'll regret it forever. I'd rather fail trying than never try at all." The day I submitted the application, I felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. The grant committee wouldn't announce winners for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of waiting, of not knowing, of trying to keep working and living, while this huge question mark hung over my future. 3 weeks into that waiting period, something unexpected happened. I was at a tech conference in San Jose, mostly there to work my company's booth and hand out flyers, when I attended a panel discussion about agriculture and technology. After the panel, I approached one of the speakers to ask a question about sensor integration. His name was Fletcher, a software engineer about my age, with dark, curly hair and an easy smile. We started talking, and one conversation turned into 2 hours standing in the convention center hallway, discussing artificial intelligence applications and machine learning and all the ways technology could revolutionize farming. He got excited when I told him about my grant proposal, about the pest prediction system I was designing. "That's brilliant," he said. And the way he said it, I could tell he actually meant it. "Have you thought about who would develop the software side? Because I would love to work on something like that." I grew up on a farm in Oregon. My parents wanted me to take it over, but I wanted to code. They still don't really speak to me. He laughed when he said it, but I heard the hurt underneath. "I know exactly what you mean," I said. We exchanged contact information, and over the next few weeks, Fletcher and I started meeting regularly at coffee shops, sketching out ideas on napkins, arguing in the best way about algorithms and data sets and user interface design. He understood the technical side in ways I didn't, and I understood the agricultural side in ways he didn't. We balanced each other. More than that, I had found someone who got it, who understood what it was like to be rejected by your family for choosing your own path. Our friendship grew into something I hadn't even known I was missing, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared dreams. The email from the USDA came on a Tuesday morning. I was at work, sitting in a meeting I wasn't really paying attention to, when my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw the subject line, USDA Innovation Grant Application Decision. My hands started shaking so badly I had to excuse myself from the meeting. I walked to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and opened the email. The first word I saw was, "Congratulations." I had to read it 3 times before it sank in. I had been awarded the full $50,000. I called Fletcher immediately, barely able to speak through my excitement and relief. He shouted so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Sloan! This is it! This is actually happening." We met that evening and started making plans. With $50,000, we could build a real prototype, test it with actual farmers, start to turn this idea into a viable business. After Fletcher left, I sat in my car in the parking lot and did something I shouldn't have done. I called home. I wanted to share this moment with my family. I wanted my father to say he was proud, my mother to say she always knew I could do it. I wanted it so badly I ignored every lesson experience had taught me. Warren answered the phone. "Dad?" I said, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. "I got the grant, $50,000 for my agricultural AI project. They believed in my idea." There was a pause, then my father said, "50,000, huh? That's something, I guess." His voice was flat, unimpressed. "Clayton lost $200,000 because you weren't here to help him. But sure, congratulations on your little grant." I felt like he had punched me in the stomach. Before I could respond, my mother's voice came through. She had picked up the extension. "Sloan, if you have that kind of money available, you should bring it home. The farm needs it. Your family needs it." Stop wasting it on your projects and do something useful with it. I tried to explain that the money wasn't mine to just use however I wanted, that it was specifically for the project, that there would be audits and reporting requirements. But they weren't interested in explanations. Clayton got on the phone then, his voice careful, manipulative in a way I recognized but didn't want to acknowledge. Hey, little sister. That's great about your grant. Listen, I know you've got your own thing going on, but family has to stick together, right? I could really use about $30,000 to get some new equipment. It would really help us out here. When I said no, when I explained again that I couldn't just take grant money and give it to him, his tone changed completely. You're so selfish, he said. You've always been selfish. Mom and Dad are right about you. You don't care about anyone but yourself. He hung up. My mother called back an hour later, crying, telling me I was a horrible daughter, that I had turned my back on family, that the money would mean nothing if I lost my family over it. You already don't have a family, I wanted to say. You made sure of that. But I didn't say it. I just hung up and blocked their numbers. I was done. I had to be done. If I kept letting them in, they would destroy me. Fletcher and I officially registered our company 3 months later. We called it AgTech, a name that felt right, solid, meaningful. We found a garage in a rundown part of San Jose that we could rent cheap, set up a couple of folding tables, brought in our laptops and a whiteboard, and got to work. Neither of us took a salary that first year. We couldn't afford to. Every penny of the grant money went into development, into equipment, into the countless small expenses that nobody tells you about when you start a business. We lived on instant noodles and day-old bagels from the coffee shop down the street that gave us their leftovers. I was happier than I had been in years. We hired one intern, a brilliant computer science student from Stanford named Nora who was in her final year of undergrad. She worked for us for course credit and the promise of a real job once we got funded, sleeping on an air mattress in the corner of the garage some nights when we worked too late for her to go back to campus safely. The three of us became a strange little family, bound together by exhaustion and belief in what we were building, and copious amounts of terrible coffee. Nora's parents thought she was insane for working with an unfunded startup instead of taking one of the multiple Silicon Valley internships she had been offered. They think, I'm throwing away my future. She told me one night around 2 a.m. as we debugged code. But I believe in this. I believe in you. I looked at this brilliant young woman who barely knew me, who had chosen to bet on us, and I felt a weight of responsibility that was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. 6 months into building AgTech, I made the mistake of posting about our company on LinkedIn. It was a simple post, nothing fancy, just a few sentences about how Fletcher and I had founded an agricultural technology startup and were working on AI solutions for farmers. I included a photo of our garage office, messy and real and honestly kind of pathetic looking, but we were proud of it. The post got some nice engagement from people in the tech community, a few congratulations messages, some people asking questions about what exactly we were building. Then, a week later, I started getting strange messages. Farmers from Iowa, people I had gone to high school with, people from our hometown, all messaging me with variations of the same question. Is it true you scammed your family? Did you really steal money that was meant to help your parents? I was completely confused until someone sent me a screenshot. My mother had posted on Facebook a long, rambling post about how her ungrateful daughter had received money from the government but refused to help her struggling family. The post painted me as some kind of greedy monster who cared more about money than blood. We sacrificed everything to raise her. Judith had written, we supported her dreams even when it meant hardship for us, and now that she has resources, she turns her back on the family that gave her everything. Some children forget where they came from. The post had been shared dozens of times. People I had grown up with, people who didn't know me anymore, were commenting things like, that's terrible and family should come first and money changes people. But it got worse. Clayton had commented on the post. She took the opportunities our family gave her and abandoned us when we needed her most. We're proud of her success, but heartbroken by her choices. I sat staring at that comment for a long time, feeling something break inside me that I didn't know how to fix. This wasn't just neglect or dismissal anymore. This was active sabotage. They were trying to destroy my reputation, to poison the community against me, and they were doing it publicly and deliberately. Dr. Hughes called me that afternoon. She had seen the posts, someone had forwarded them to her. "Sloane, you need to protect yourself legally," she said. "This is defamation. They're spreading false information that could damage your business." That's when I met Brooke, a lawyer friend of Dr. Hughes who specialized in reputation management and business law. Brooke was sharp and intimidating in the best possible way, a woman in her 40s who looked at me with something like fury on my behalf when I showed her the posts. "They can't do this," she said flatly. "I'll represent you pro bono. Consider it my contribution to women supporting women in male-dominated fields." Within 2 days, Brooke had sent a cease and desist letter to my mother and Clayton, formally demanding they remove the posts or face legal action for defamation. My mother called me then, furious, her voice shaking. "You're threatening your own mother? You'd sue your own family? What kind of person are you? The kind who won't let you lie about me publicly," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Take down the posts, Mom. I mean it." She called me names I won't repeat, told me I was no longer her daughter, that I had destroyed our family. Then she hung up. The posts came down that afternoon. But she had gotten the last word in anyway. "Mai hongkon la kongai tau nua," she had said. "You're not my daughter anymore." Part of me shattered hearing that, even though I had known it was true for years. 8 months into developing AgriSense, we hit our first major crisis. We had finally built a working prototype of our pest prediction system, and we partnered with a small farm about an hour outside San Jose for a trial run. The farmer, a man named Garrett who grew organic vegetables, agreed to let us install our sensors and run our system on his fields for a season. Everything seemed to be working perfectly for the first few weeks. Then our AI made a catastrophic error. It predicted an outbreak of aphids that wasn't actually coming and recommended a preventative treatment schedule. Garrett, trusting our system, spent $8,000 on organic pest treatments and labor. The aphids never showed up. Worse, we had missed early signs of a fungal infection that our system should have caught, and by the time Garrett noticed it himself, he had lost a significant portion of his crop. He was understandably furious. He called me, screaming about the money he had wasted and the money he had lost, threatening to sue us for damages, to tell everyone in the agricultural community that our technology was dangerous and unreliable. Fletcher said what we were all thinking. Maybe we should quit before we hurt more people. Maybe we're not ready for this. Nora was crying quietly at her desk, and I knew she was thinking about the Google internship she had turned down, about how she had trusted us, and now this. I felt like the world's biggest failure. I had dragged these people who believed in me into something that was actively harming others. That night, I sat alone in the garage after everyone had left, staring at my laptop, and I wrote an email to Dr. Hughes. It was an apology and a resignation all at once. I explained what had happened, told her I was going to dissolve the company, that I wasn't cut out for this. My finger hovered over the send button for a long time. Then my phone rang. It was Fletcher. His voice was excited, breathless. "I found the bug. Sloane, I found it. There was an error in how we were processing the humidity data. It's fixable. We can fix this." We worked for 72 hours straight, barely sleeping, subsisting on energy drinks and determination. We found the error, fixed it, rebuilt the algorithm, tested it 100 different ways. Then I called Garrett and did the hardest thing I had ever done in business. I apologized completely, took full responsibility, and offered to work for him for free for a year to make up for his losses. There was a long silence on the phone. Then Garrett said, "You know what? Most tech people would have just tried to weasel out of this, blame me for following their recommendations wrong or something. You owned it. Let me see your new system. If it works, well, call it even." AgriSense version 2.0 worked beautifully. Over the next 6 months, Garrett's farm saw a 20% reduction in pest-related crop loss and a 30% reduction in treatment costs. He was thrilled, and more importantly, he started telling other farmers about us. Word of mouth in the agricultural community is everything, and suddenly we had 5 new clients, then 10, then 20. We were still barely making enough money to keep the lights on, but we were growing. We had actual customers who were seeing real results. Fletcher, Nora, and I started allowing ourselves to believe that maybe we could actually make this work. Then, Clayton reached out. It had been over a year since I had blocked my family's numbers, since that disastrous phone call about the grant money. I was surprised when I saw his name pop up on my email one afternoon. The subject line said, "Can we talk?" The email itself was short and seemed genuine. "Sloan, I know things have been bad between us. I know I messed up. I want to make things right. Can we video chat? I want to understand what you're doing with your company. Maybe I can learn something. Maybe we can actually be brother and sister again." I showed the email to Fletcher, who frowned and said, "I don't trust it. But I wanted to believe my brother could change. I wanted to believe there was some part of our relationship worth saving. So I agreed to a video call. Clayton looked older when he appeared on my screen, more worn down than I remembered. We talked for almost an hour, and it felt almost like old times, like when we were kids and he would sneak me extra cookies from the jar or teach me how to skip rocks at the pond. He asked thoughtful questions about AgriSense, about how the technology worked, about our business model and our customers. He seemed genuinely interested, impressed even. "I'm really proud of you, Sloan," he said before we hung up. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you when you needed me. I'm trying to do better." I went to bed that night feeling lighter than I had in months, thinking maybe family could be repaired after all. 2 months later, Fletcher came into the garage with his laptop, his face grim. "We need to talk," he said, and something about his tone made my stomach drop. He turned his computer to show me a series of messages. Clayton had reached out to 5 of our biggest clients, farmers who represented almost 40% of our current revenue. He had introduced himself as my brother, as someone who had grown up in agriculture and understood their needs. He had pitched them on a competing service, claimed he could offer everything AgriSense did but for 30% less because he had lower overhead and family connections to equipment suppliers. 3 of our clients had already switched to Clayton's service. I felt physically sick. I called Clayton immediately, not caring that it was late, not caring about anything except the betrayal burning through my chest. He answered on the second ring, his voice casual. "Hey Sloan, what's going on?" "What's going on?" I repeated, my voice shaking with rage. "You stole my customers. You used information I gave you in confidence to compete against me. How could you do this?" He sighed, and I could hear the defensiveness creeping into his voice. "Look, it's not personal, it's just business. You can't expect me to not pursue opportunities just because we're related. Business is business. I trusted you," I said. "I thought we were rebuilding something." "We are," he said, "but that doesn't mean I have to just let you have the whole market. You should have stayed in the family business instead of running off and being a traitor in the first place. Then we could have worked together. This is on you." Before I could respond, I heard my mother's voice in the background, loud and clear. "Is that her? Tell her she made her choice. She doesn't get to complain now." I hung up and immediately called Brooke, our lawyer. She was furious on our behalf, started talking about non-compete agreements and client interference and breach of confidential information. "Did you sign any kind of agreement before you talked to him?" she asked. I admitted I hadn't, that I had just talked to my brother like a normal person talks to family. "Then, legally, it's going to be hard to prove wrongdoing," she said. "But we can send a cease and desist, make it clear that if he continues to use information you provided, there will be legal consequences." The legal battle dragged on for 6 months and cost us $80,000 in legal fees that we could barely afford. In the end, Clayton shut down his competing service, not because we won the legal fight, but because he couldn't actually deliver on his promises. He had underestimated how complex the technology was, had oversold his capabilities, and his clients started complaining. But the damage was done. AgriSense had lost 3 major clients. Our reputation had taken a hit from the family drama becoming semi-public, and I was emotionally destroyed. It was during this lowest point that something unexpected happened. AgriSense had entered a startup competition in San Francisco, mostly because the entry fee was only $100 and we figured we had nothing to lose. The competition was huge, 300 startups competing across different categories, with panels of judges and investors and media coverage. I almost didn't go to present. I felt like a fraud, like someone pretending to be a successful entrepreneur while everything was falling apart behind the scenes. But Fletcher insisted. "We've come too far to give up now," he said. "Get up there and tell them what we've built." So I did. I stood in front of 300 people and talked about AgriSense, about the problem we were solving, about the farmers we had helped. My voice shook at first, but as I got into it, something shifted. I stopped seeing the audience as judges and started seeing them as potential believers. I told them the truth, that we had failed, that we had hurt a farmer, that we had rebuilt from that failure and created something better. I talked about the 20 farmers who were using our system now, about the real-world impact we were having. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat, then the applause started. We won first place, $100,000. I stood on that stage holding an oversized check, Fletcher and Nora on either side of me, and I couldn't stop crying. After the ceremony, a woman approached me. She was in her 60s, elegant in a way that spoke of old money and power, and she introduced herself as Vivian Caldwell. I recognized the name immediately. She was a venture capitalist, one of the few women who had made it big in Silicon Valley, worth hundreds of millions. "I liked your presentation," she said, her voice direct and no nonsense. "More than that, I liked that you talked about your failure. Too many founders try to pretend they've never screwed up. You owned it, learned from it, got better. That's what I look for." She handed me her card. "I want to invest in AgriSense. Let's set up a meeting to talk numbers." 3 weeks later, Vivian invested $1.2 million into AgriSense. In exchange for 20% equity, she gave us enough runway to hire a real team, to move out of the garage and into an actual office, to scale our operations properly. She also became a mentor, teaching me about business strategy and negotiation, and how to handle investors, and how to carry myself as a CEO. She was tough, demanding, and one of the best things that ever happened to me. "You've got something special," she told me after one particularly grueling strategy session. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Not your family, not your competitors, not even yourself." With Vivian's investment and guidance, AgriSense began to truly grow. We moved into a real office in downtown San Jose, hired 10 employees, expanded our services to 12 states. Our first-year revenue was $800,000. It wasn't huge by Silicon Valley standards, but for us, for where we had come from, it was incredible. The next 18 months were a blur of growth and exhaustion. AgriSense went from 20 clients to 50 to 100. We refined our technology, added new features, started winning industry awards. I was working 16-hour days, sleeping in the office more often than not, running on a mixture of adrenaline and stubbornness that probably wasn't healthy. Fletcher kept telling me I needed to slow down, to take care of myself, but I couldn't. Every success felt like another piece of proof that I had been right to leave, that I was worth something, that I could build something meaningful. I was so focused on proving my family wrong that I was slowly destroying myself in the process. Then the Iowa news cycle picked up our story. A local business reporter wrote an article about AgriSense, about the Iowa farm girl who had made it big in Silicon Valley tech. The article mentioned our revenue, our client base, our recent funding round. It was positive press, great for business. It also meant that everyone back home now knew I had money. My father called me for the first time in 3 years. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Sloan," he said when I picked up, his voice gruff and awkward. "Your mother and I saw the article about your company. Looks like you're doing well for yourself." There was a pause, and I waited, not willing to make this easy for him. Then he continued, "Thing is, this farm has been in the family for 3 generations. Your mother and I are getting older. We need help keeping it going. We figured, since you're doing so well out there with all that money, you could invest in the family business. Say, $500,000 would really set us up right." I actually laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You want me to give you $500,000? After everything?" Warren's voice hardened immediately. "We raised you. We fed you and clothed you and put a roof over your head for 18 years. You owe us. That money you've got, you wouldn't have any of it if we hadn't given you life and raised you right. A good daughter pays back what she owes." Before I could respond, he hung up. My mother called back an hour later, her approach softer, more manipulative. Sloan, honey, your father didn't mean to be harsh, has just worried. Clayton is in trouble again, owes the bank a lot of money. If we lose this farm, it will kill your father. You're the only one who can help us. Doesn't family mean anything to you? I tried to explain, with more patience than they deserved, that the money in AgriSense wasn't mine to just take and give away. I had investors, I had a board, I had legal obligations. The money belonged to the company and to our stakeholders. My mother cut me off. You're just making excuses. You've always looked down on us, thought you were better than your family. Now that you have money, you won't even help your own brother, your own parents. Clayton called next, his voice different than the previous times, quieter, almost broken. Sloan, I'm drowning. I owe $200,000 to the bank. They're going to take everything. I know I messed up before. I know I hurt you, but I'm begging you, I'm your brother. Please. There was real desperation in his voice, and part of me, the part that remembered being kids together, wanted to help. But the smarter part, the part that had been burned too many times, knew that giving him money wouldn't fix anything. It would just enable more bad decisions and give them more power to hurt me. I can't, Clayton, I said. I'm sorry you're struggling, but I can't keep being your safety net. His desperation turned to anger instantly. You're just like they say. Heartless. You care more about your precious company than your own flesh and blood. I hope you're happy with your money, because you've lost your family. He hung up. A week later, a cousin I barely knew named Whitley called me. She was sweet at first, asking how I was doing, saying she had heard about my success and wanted to reconnect. We talked for almost an hour, and foolishly, I let my guard down. I told her about the company, about our growth plans, about some of the challenges we were facing. She seemed genuinely interested, supportive even. Then, 3 days later, she posted on Facebook, "It's sad when money changes people. My cousin Sloan has become so successful, but she refuses to help her family who are struggling. She has millions, they are about to lose their farm, and she turns her back. Guess blood doesn't mean what it used to." The post went viral in my hometown. Extended family members, people I hadn't spoken to in a decade, piled on in the comments. How ungrateful. Family should come first. Money and education made her forget where she came from. Only one person defended me publicly. My grandmother Opal, my mother's mother, who was 82 years old and had always been kind to me even when the rest of the family wasn't, commented on the post. "You people don't know the whole story. Sloan doesn't owe anyone anything, she earned everything she has." Then she called me privately. "Don't let them break you, sweetheart," she said, her voice thin but fierce. "I've watched your mother and father treat you poorly your whole life. You did the right thing leaving. Don't you dare give them a penny out of guilt." The stress was getting to everyone at AgriSense. I was short-tempered, demanding, pushing everyone too hard because I was pushing myself too hard. Nora, who had been with us from the beginning, finally confronted me one afternoon. "Sloan, you're not okay. You're working yourself to death, and you're making the rest of us miserable in the process. We believe in this company, but not if it means destroying ourselves for it." She was right, but I didn't know how to stop. A new employee we had hired, a woman named Gretchen who worked in our client relations department, started spreading rumors around the office that I was playing favorites, that Fletcher got preferential treatment because we were close. The rumors created tension in the team. People started taking sides, and the culture we had built started to fracture. Then we discovered that Gretchen had been in contact with Clayton. She had been feeding him information about our client list, our pricing strategies, our product development pipeline. Fletcher found emails on her work computer that proved she had sold our confidential information to my brother for $5,000. We fired her immediately, but the damage was done. Clayton had used the information to approach more of our clients, had tried to restart his competing service with inside knowledge of our operations. Brooke, our lawyer, filed an immediate lawsuit, and this time we had clear evidence of wrongdoing. But the legal process was slow and expensive, and Clayton was smart enough to shut everything down before we could get an injunction. The whole situation cost us another $80,000 in legal fees and an immeasurable amount of stress and team morale. I was falling apart. I stopped sleeping more than 3 or 4 hours a night. I lost weight because I kept forgetting to eat. Fletcher found me one night at 2 a.m. in the office, just sitting in the dark staring at nothing, and he physically hauled me out of there. "You're going home," he said. "And tomorrow you're taking the day off. I don't care if the building is on fire, you need to rest." I wanted to argue, but I was too tired. I went home, crawled into bed, and slept for 14 hours straight. When I woke up, I had 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. Clayton had filed a lawsuit against me personally, claiming that AgriSense had been built using ideas and knowledge that belonged to the family farm, and that I owed him and my parents 50% of the company's equity. The lawsuit was ridiculous, baseless, but it was also public and damaging. Some of our investors started getting nervous, asking questions about whether there was any validity to the claims. I spent weeks providing documentation, showing patents filed in my name, research papers I had published, proof of the independent development of our technology. It was humiliating and exhausting, and I wanted to give up 1,000 times. The lawsuit against me became very real very quickly. Clayton had somehow scraped together money to hire a lawyer, aggressive man who specialized in intellectual property disputes. Their claim was that the ideas behind AgriSense had originated from family discussions and my education, which had been supported by the family, and therefore I owed them significant equity in the company. They presented as evidence old emails I had sent home during college, the ones where I had shared my ideas and research hoping for parental approval. They twisted those emails, made it seem like I had been using family resources and family knowledge to develop what would become AgriSense. My mother testified at a deposition, crying on cue, talking about how they had sacrificed everything for my education, how they had supported my dreams even when it was hard. She conveniently left out every time they had told me to quit, every time they had dismissed my ideas, every time they had cut me down. The trial became a media spectacle in the agricultural technology world. "Family sues daughter over AgTech startup" was the headline in every trade publication. Some of our investors got cold feet, threatening to pull their funding if the lawsuit wasn't resolved quickly. Only Vivian stood firm. She called me the night before the trial started and said, "I've seen worse than this. We're going to fight, and we're going to win. Your family is trying to profit off work they never did and pain they caused. Don't let them." Dr. Hughes flew in from California to testify as an expert witness, bringing with her every scrap of documentation from my time as her student and research assistant, proving that I had developed the core concepts of AgriSense entirely independently. Brooke, our lawyer, was a force of nature in the courtroom, methodically destroying every claim my family made. The worst part was sitting there in that courtroom watching my family lie. My father, in his good church suit, talking about how supportive they had always been of my education. Clayton, looking earnest and wounded, claiming I had promised him partnership in any business I started. My mother, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, saying, "I just don't understand why she hates us so much. We only ever loved her." I had to sit there and listen to them rewrite history, turn themselves into victims, and me into a villain. When it was my turn to testify, Brooke walked me through everything. The years of being told I wasn't good enough, the way they had stolen my work and given Clayton credit, the money I had sent to help Clayton that was never repaid, the way they had publicly slandered me when I refused to bankroll their demands. I kept my voice steady, presented evidence for every claim, let the facts speak for themselves. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Anderson, listened to everything with an impassive expression. When both sides had presented their cases, she looked at my mother and father sitting in the front row and said, "I've heard enough. It's clear to this court that Miss Sloan developed her technology and business independently, using her own education and expertise. The fact that she once shared ideas with her family does not constitute a binding partnership agreement or entitle them to equity. Furthermore, the evidence presented suggests a long pattern of the family diminishing and undermining Miss Sloan's contributions. The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice." Then she turned to my family's lawyer and said, "Your clients will pay Miss Sloan's legal fees in the amount of $50,000 within 30 days. I watched my father's face turn red, watched my mother crumple in her seat, watched Clayton stare at the floor. They had gambled and lost, and it had cost them in a way that actually hurt. After the trial, I walked out of that courthouse with Fletcher and Nora and Brooke, and I felt lighter than I had in years. My phone was buzzing with messages, reporters wanting comments, investors checking in, but I ignored all of it. We went to a diner and ate pancakes and laughed about stupid things, and for the first time in months I felt like maybe everything was going to be okay. 2 months after the trial, I received an email that changed everything. The CEO of TerraVest Corporation, one of the largest agricultural technology companies in the country, wanted to meet with me. TerraVest had been watching AgriSense for over a year, had been impressed by our growth and our technology and our resilience through the family drama that had become public. They wanted to acquire us. Fletcher, Nora, and I met in our conference room late one night after the official offer came through. $8.5 million for full acquisition of AgriSense, with the condition that all current employees would be retained and the company would continue to operate with its mission of helping small farmers intact. It was more money than I had ever imagined having in my lifetime. Fletcher looked at me across the table and said, "This is it. This is what we've been working toward. This validates everything." Nora was crying, happy tears. We did it. We actually did it. I thought about that garage where we had started, about the ramen noodles and the 70-hour work weeks, and all the times we had almost given up. I thought about my family and everything they had said I would never accomplish. I thought about every person who had believed in me when they didn't have to. Dr. Hughes and Vivian and Brooke and these 2 people sitting across from me who had bet their futures on my crazy idea. The acquisition closed 3 weeks later. I sat in a law office in Manhattan, the same one from the beginning of this story, and signed papers that transferred ownership of AgriSense to TerraVest for $8.5 million. After the deal terms were factored in, after we paid back Vivian's investment with returns, after we distributed shares to Fletcher and Nora and early employees, I walked away with $5.2 million personally. Fletcher and Nora each got substantial payouts too, enough to change their lives. We stood on the sidewalk outside the law office, the 3 of us, and we hugged and cried and couldn't quite believe it was real. Vivian sent me a text message that just said, "I knew you would make it, proud of you." Dr. Hughes called and her voice was thick with emotion when she said, "Sloan, you did exactly what I knew you could do." I decided I needed to go home to Iowa one last time. Not to reconcile, not to seek approval I knew I would never get, but to close a door properly. I rented a car and drove through familiar streets until I reached the farm. It looked even more run down than before. Paint peeling on the barn, equipment rusting in the yard. My parents must have heard the car because they came out onto the porch, Warren and Judith, looking older and more worn than I remembered. I got out of the car and walked up to them, and for a moment nobody spoke. Then my father said, gruff and uncomfortable, "Heard you sold your company. Guess you did all right after all." I pulled an envelope from my bag and handed it to him. Inside was a cashier's check for $100,000 and a letter. My father opened it, looked at the check, looked at me with confusion. "I'm not giving you this because I owe you anything," I said, my voice steady. "I'm giving it to you because I want to prove that I'm not like you. I don't hold on to bitterness and I don't punish people by withholding help when I can afford to give it. But this is the last time. After today, I'm done. I won't be back. You can use that money to save the farm, or you can waste it like you've wasted everything else. I don't care anymore." Clayton appeared in the doorway then, and he looked at me with something that might have been shame or might have been anger. I couldn't tell. "Sloan," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. For everything. I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry." I looked at my brother and I felt sad for him. Sad for the person he could have been if our parents hadn't twisted him into someone who saw family as something to exploit instead of cherish. "I hope you figure out your own path someday, Clayton," I said. "I really do." My mother reached for my hand as I turned to leave, tried to hold on to me. "Wait," she said, and her voice cracked. "Can't you stay? Can't we talk about this?" I gently pulled my hand away. "There's nothing left to talk about, Mom. You made your choices. I've made mine." My father stood silent through all of this, his face hard and closed off the way it had always been. I got in my car and drove away without looking back. And this time, I didn't cry. I just felt free. My phone rang an hour into the drive. It was my grandmother Opal. "I heard you went by the house," she said. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. So proud of who you've become. You didn't let them break you. I pulled over at a rest stop and we talked for half an hour, and she told me stories about my childhood that I had forgotten, good memories mixed in with the bad. When we hung up, I sat there for a while watching trucks roll by on the highway, and I felt at peace in a way I never had before. 6 months after selling AgriSense, I finally let myself rest. Fletcher and Nora and I took a trip to Europe together, something none of us had ever done before because we had always been too busy or too broke. We spent 2 weeks eating good food and seeing beautiful places and not talking about work at all. One afternoon in Paris, sitting at a sidewalk cafe watching people walk by, Fletcher asked me, "Do you regret any of it? All the pain with your family, all the years of struggling?" I thought about it for a long time before I answered. "I regret that they couldn't see me for who I really was," I said. "I regret all the years I spent trying to be enough for people who were determined to see me as insufficient. But I don't regret who I became. I don't regret the life I built. Maybe I needed all that rejection to learn how to believe in myself when no one else would." When we got back to the United States, I started therapy. It was something I should have done years earlier, but I had always been too busy, too focused on survival to deal with the emotional damage my family had caused. My therapist helped me understand that what I had experienced wasn't just neglect or disappointment. It was emotional abuse, systematic undermining, a pattern of behavior designed to keep me small and dependent and grateful for scraps of affection. Learning to name it, to see it clearly, was both painful and liberating. I started reconnecting with the people who had supported me, Dr. Hughes and Vivian and Brooke, building intentional relationships with people who chose to be in my life and who I chose back. I learned that family isn't just the people you're born to. Family is the people who show up for you, who believe in you, who celebrate your wins, and support you through your losses. I used part of the money from the acquisition to establish a scholarship fund. I called it the Disappointment Daughters Fund, and it provides full-ride scholarships to young women from farming families who want to study agricultural science or engineering. The application doesn't ask about grades or test scores or extracurricular activities. It asks one question. Tell us about a time when someone in your family made you feel like you weren't enough, and tell us what you want to become anyway. The first year, we gave out 10 scholarships. By year 3, we were giving out 50. I read every application personally, and each one breaks my heart and fills it at the same time. These girls, these young women who have been told they're not good enough or smart enough, or that their dreams are too big, they're going to change the world. I write to each scholarship recipient personally, and I always end the letter the same way. You don't have to prove anything to anyone except yourself. You are already enough. 2 years after the acquisition, I got a letter in the mail. The return address was my childhood home in Iowa, and the handwriting on the envelope was my mother's. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity won out. The letter was short and written on lined notebook paper. "Dear Sloan, I don't know if you'll even read this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. Your father and I have had a lot of time to think since you came by. We were wrong. We were wrong about so many things. I was angry at life, at being stuck on a farm that was failing, at watching everything we worked for slip away, and I took that anger out on you. You were easier to control than your brother, easier to blame, and I realize now that we broke something that can't be fixed. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were never a disappointment. You were the strong one, the brave one, and we were too blind and bitter to recognize it. I'm proud of you. I should have said it 1,000 times before now. Love, Mom." I sat at my kitchen table holding that letter, and I cried for a long time. Not because the letter fixed anything, not because an apology erases decades of pain, but because I realized I had already forgiven them. Not for their sake, but for mine. Carrying around anger and hurt was like drinking poison and expecting them to die from it. I had spent so much of my life trying to prove them wrong, trying to show them I was worth something, and in doing that I had given them power over me that they didn't deserve. Forgiving them meant taking that power back. It meant accepting that they had done the best they could with their own damaged hearts and limited perspectives, and it meant accepting that their best had not been good enough, and that was okay. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had my own. I never responded to my mother's letter, But I didn't throw it away either. I kept it in a drawer, a reminder of the journey I had taken from that farm to this moment. AgriSense continued to thrive under TerraVest, serving thousands of farmers across the country, exactly the mission we had set out to accomplish. Fletcher and Nora both stayed with the company in leadership roles, and we remained close friends, the kind of family you choose for yourself. I started working on a new project, a venture capital fund specifically for women founders in agriculture technology, using my experience and my money to be for other women what Vivian had been for me. One evening, I hosted a small dinner party at my apartment in San Francisco. Dr. Hughes was there, and Vivian, and Brooke, and Fletcher and Nora, and my grandmother Opal, who I had flown out from Iowa. We sat around my table eating and laughing and telling stories, and I looked around at these people who had chosen to stand beside me, who had believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and I felt overwhelmingly grateful. Fletcher raised his glass and said, "To Sloane, who never gave up, even when she had every reason to." Everyone clinked glasses and drank, and then Vivian said, "So what's next for you, Sloane? You've conquered AgTech, you've built a scholarship fund, you're investing in other founders. What's the next mountain to climb?" I thought about it for a moment, then smiled. "I'm thinking about starting another company," I said. "Something focused on sustainable farming practices for small family farms, systems that could help families like mine who are struggling. But this time, I'm building it for all the daughters who were told they couldn't. For all the women who were called disappointments because they wanted more than what their families prescribed for them." Nora leaned forward, excited. "I'm in. Whatever it is, I'm in." Fletcher nodded. "Obviously, the truth I've learned is this. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most, who are supposed to nurture your dreams and celebrate your successes, are the people who hurt you the deepest. Sometimes your own family can't see your value because they're too consumed by their own pain, their own failures, their own broken dreams. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can spend your whole life trying to earn love from people who are incapable of giving it, or you can build a new life with people who see you for who you really are. Success isn't about proving them wrong, though that can feel satisfying in the moment. Real success is about proving yourself right, about honoring the voice inside you that says you're worth more than how they treat you, about building something meaningful, regardless of whether anyone from your past is there to witness it. My parents called me their disappointment daughter. They looked at me and saw someone who wasn't enough, someone who would never measure up, someone whose dreams were foolish and whose ambitions were selfishness. But I looked at myself and saw a survivor. I saw someone who could take rejection and failure and betrayal and transform them into fuel. I saw someone who could build companies and change lives and create opportunities for other women like me. And that difference in perspective, that choice to believe in myself when no one else would, that made all the difference in the world. I am not what they said I was. I am what I chose to become. And I chose to become free. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like the black sheep in your family? Have you had to choose between staying in a situation that was hurting you and striking out on your own? Drop a comment below and share your story, because I promise you're not alone. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel seen or inspired or just less lonely in your own struggles, smash that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's fighting their own battles with family expectations and self-doubt. Your story matters. Your dreams matter. You matter, regardless of whether the people who raised you can see it. Thank you for being here, for listening, for being part of this community of people who refuse to let anyone else define their worth. I believe in you, even if no one else does yet. Now go out there and prove yourself right.